On Friday night, Melbourne City hosted Macarthur, a battle between two sides whose history tells two very interesting stories about club identity in the A-League era. One owned by the world's most successful multi-club network, rich in bankroll, facilities and resources, poor in fan support, football culture and authenticity. The other born to play third fiddle in a city where the duopoly was rather successful on its own, doing everything it can to bring people on board in a steady but slow race. The game was what it was, 2-0 to the home side, but it wasn't the most attended game of football in Australia on Friday night. Because whilst 3,500 people sat in a cavernous Amy Park for their A-League fix, over 9,000 packed into BT Connor Reserve to watch State League football. Preston Lions versus South Melbourne in the NPL Victoria. The difference in those figures should be alarming, perhaps even more so that no A-League game over the whole weekend was able to beat it. Now, yes, this is the biggest game of the NPL season, and the weekend's A-League schedule left a lot to be desired. No one is trying to argue any differently. But when the time comes again for the APL to consider expansion, only a fool would consider creating a new beyond elevating what we've already got on this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. My name is Lachlan and Avil, and I'm thrilled to be welcoming back Will Booth for tonight. Will, you've had a couple of weeks away. I know the football season gets very busy for you, but we're happy to have you.
Yes, sidelined through injury for a bit, and good to be back in the starting 11, starting 4 for tonight.
Starting 4, that's right, yeah, full.
You're a goalkeeper, mate.
Yeah. That's why you've been letting so many in without me, but back on the sticks.
Christian Montegan, good evening to you as well.
Good evening, good to be here.
And Jacob Stevens, hello.
Good to be here as always, Lucky.
Expansion is the flavour of the top of the show here tonight, and it's something that was brought to light by this exceptional crowd at the Preston South game on the weekend. It was an amazing game of football, packed to the absolute brim. 2-0 to Preston Lions in the end. A nice cheeky Panenka in front of their home support. Does pretty good for state football vibes. But the idea of expansion is obviously, it's still a burgeoning topic in an A-League context as well, because of Auckland and Canberra, more specifically, still kind of falling through, and we know they won't be here in time for the 25-26 season as well. It just feels, I'll go to you first, Will, that you're probably more than any of us rooted in this kind of local community club, scene in Australian football. We have tried this before. We've flirted with trying to bring in existing clubs into A-League, and it hasn't happened just for whatever reason. But when you see an example like Preston show the support, the resources, the ambition that they do, why would we go and just try and create a new club somewhere else? Yeah,
like the track record of creating this club from nothing, really. It's about 50-50, you'd say, probably in the history, right? We've seen some good examples in this season and some previous ones, but we've also seen clubs that are now kind of, struggling with that next level of growth. And even teams that have been, taken over, looking at City, really, ironically, that they lack a bit of heart, right?
Well done.
Thank you. No, it's just, they don't have any steps for progression. They don't have that unique geographical kind of area and any pull in the area to base themselves off and bring fans in, whereas Preston have that. I know a lot of often at NPL games in Sydney and they feel tied to the community. You have, even in the early stages, it would be the same couple of hundred people there, but it's just something to build off. You're not trying to create this fan base out of nothing, and you get a couple hundred there, and 1,000 plus in the bigger games, and obviously this South Preston one was one. That's the headline match in the season, really. So that's why I could bring in such a pool. But like, the numbers are there, the interest is there. I love attending my I go to Leichhardt in Sydney the most, and it feels really, it does feel really in touch with the culture in the area, and you get the best coffee, I've always said, at any football game I've been to, because of the the Italians wouldn't accept any less there. So no, it's just it's honestly, that provides the pathway, and we just haven't seen it really come to fruition in the A-League. I think it's because the NPL clubs are already struggling financially in a lot of ways, and they're set up to just kind of be run at the level they are, right? It's hard for them to make the next step financially in, a sponsorship way and really bringing in any of those, those bigger financial helps. But yeah, like it is in terms of the fan base and connection to that, you can't beat it really.
So Christian, Will made a good point. Auckland have come in this season and, like the Wanderers did when they came in, those are clearly the two best examples of from the ground up A-League expansion that we've seen. And when you have an owner like Bill Foley with the experience he brought, didn't really do it himself, but he brought in the right people to be able to do it for him and create a club and connect to the community, which is something that not a lot of A-League clubs have done very well, then you can be very successful. And obviously just the money that comes with that is a bonus as well, but you can't argue against the fact that they've really enrooted themselves in Auckland since they've come in, and the same for the Wanderers as well. And we're not trying to say that strategy can't work, because obviously it has, but you just can't. If we're still looking at expansion and going beyond 16 teams, beyond 14 teams when we finally get Canberra, there's just no way that you could consider that option of creating a new again without considering someone like a Preston who just seems on the cusp and ready for this.
Like, you've got to ask yourself as well, why has a club like Western Sydney Wanderers and Auckland been so successful, right? And yes, obviously part of it has to do with the ownership, but also the geographical location, right? I mean, in Western Sydney, that is such a growing like football area. Like that's where the likes of Timmy Cahill grew up, Brett Emerton, all these Socceroos legends that have played in that sort of community, and that's where they felt left out, and they were always going to bring that, a great crowd and a great atmosphere, and that's why they're able to grow so exponentially, right? And the same with Auckland, because they didn't really have anything, right? It was just sort of Wellington, and then you had the other Auckland team, but they were obviously in the Oceania division, so that was a bit different as well. Whereas you've got somewhere like North Queensland or Gold Coast, they don't really have that football. It's more sort of like rugby dominated or AFL, and it's like, how are you going to attract those fans, right? Whereas a club like Preston Lions or South Melbourne, they've already got the fan base behind them. They've got the history and the culture, right? So that's why, like you say, Lockie, it's a no-brainer to add these clubs into the competition, because they've already got pedigree, right? Whereas if you're getting someone like a MacArthur or Western United, you're trying to sort of build it from scratch and it's not really going anywhere. And we've seen it also with Melbourne City, right? The City Football Group, they've got the money, they've invested heaps in it, they've got new training facilities, they've done everything, they've got the best players in seasons past, they've won a championship. Still, that doesn't mean that they're selling out Amy Park, it doesn't mean any of that, right? It's basically just a regular club, which is weird to say, given that they just won a championship a few seasons ago. They won a grand final 2-3 years ago as well, and yet we're still in the same position, right, where they got 3,500 on Friday night. So I think that's where it all lies. I think the question as to why it hasn't happened yet, got to remember why the A-League started in the first place, right? It was to move away from these sort of clubs like the Prestons and the South Melbournes, and to form the A-League essentially, which is why, to build the clubs like Victory, Sydney FC, and that's why it's built up. But with that, it's pushed away a lot of fans who are, community clubs, who are, volunteers, or all this stuff that work for, the Prestons and the South Melbournes, the Melbourne Knights, etc. So I think that's why second division is so important as well, right? To bring the whole football community together, because we've seen great crowds in the A-League, throughout the 20-year history, but just imagine if everyone felt included, how much bigger it could be. So I think that's where the potential lies. And look, we've got this second division championship, whatever you want to call it, coming off the ground in a year or two time, and hopefully that just sort of lets everyone know that we do have a lot of potential. These sort of smaller clubs, if you want to call them, do have the room to grow even further. It's just about providing them that platform and the opportunity to do so.
So Jacob, Christian's brought up the championship, which is a good point, because it's like the easiest possible way for us to be able to point at one club and say, you've won the second tier. It's now that gap between the NPL. It's not all of a sudden, just like we're thinking for coaches and officials and players, the gap up from NPL to A-League is massive. Well, if you're a Preston or a South or any of these other 8 foundation clubs that now know that they're going to be part of this Australian Championship, they have the ability to go out and seek sponsors and seek playing contracts for that middle tier between the NPL and the A-League. And all of a sudden, well, then if you're successful at that level, then the step and to acquire all those assurances that you'll need to be part of the A-League is not as difficult as it would have been before.
Yeah, it's kind of a necessary step, right? Like you've got to be able to, because this is the other thing as well, is that we know that football in this country is very, very good at being unsustainable for the most part, right? Like we're always talking about financial difficulties, even for clubs in the A-League, right? Which is the pinnacle of football in the country. So, you know, to have that step between, to be able to go, right, no, we've shown that we can perform on the pitch, which is obviously very important, but also off the pitch and be able to, you know, be financially sustainable, have a decent fan base, you know, be run well, show signs of, you know, intent and aspiration, things like that. Yeah, it's like you said, it's a no-brainer really to have it. And you know, I think that what it also brings, in addition to the ability for the club to look from a football operations perspective at things like finances and sponsorship and contracts, but coming back to crowds, it theoretically as well, you know, the question you've got to ask is, why would somebody support X club in, you know, the NPL over their local A-League club, right? And you go, well, it's, you know, unless they're like, they've been, you know, their parents were, you know, played for the club or have been involved with the club, whatever, it's very difficult to really find reason, or maybe you played for them in their youth levels or whatever, right? But unless you have that direct connection, it's a lot more difficult. Whereas having, okay, it's only a couple of states at this point, but a national second division, it gives a bit of weight to what they're playing for, and I think that's going to bring fans in as well, to go, it's not just a team that's playing in the local NPL that, you know, nothing's really at stake. It's everybody can view this as a stepping stone, and it's almost like you want to get yourself in early to be like, oh no, I'm not just jumping on the bandwagon because they're, you know, it's like, oh no, I've been there since before they got promoted, sort of thing. So I think that's a potential positive to come from it as well. But no, it's definitely a big thing for these clubs, and I've spoken to a few people in South Australia involved in NPL clubs here, and this was back when the first round of expression of interest went in, but the general theme that I got was that clubs were viewing this as an investment in the future, right? It's going to take a lot of money up front and a lot of dedication, hard work up front to get things going, but the potential to pay off is massive in comparison to just sitting in the NPL for the next 10 years, right? Like, as if this does work out and it goes as well as we all hope it does, there's a chance for these clubs to move and make that step up to the next level, which is what everybody's sort of hoping and looking for. So yeah, it's an absolute no-brainer, and you know, the fact that we're now moving into this phase of, it's not just a hypothetical, it's a real thing. We've got a tournament structure, we know the clubs, it's good signs. So hopefully we can see, you know, yes, crowds like we saw at Preston and South Melbourne, we're not going to get that, you know, at every single game in the championship. I think it's fair to say, you know, this is a massive rivalry game, you know, Friday night football, you know, and two of the most supported clubs in NPL Victoria, right? So, you know, you're going to expect a big game, a big crowd. But, you know, if that's sort of what we can look forward to in these big games, that's an awesome marker to set. And, you know, I think that it's going to be really exciting to see how this is moving forwards. You know, I'm hopeful for the future, because you know, I think if this can really get off the ground and get good support, and the clubs really buy into it, which I think they already have done, then yeah, there's no reason it can't be successful.
All right, well, yeah, go on.
Oh, I just want to jump back in, sorry. I think just with the examples we said before, I think Christian kind of grouped MacArthur and Western United together. I think that's a little unfair. I think, you know, MacArthur is a study where, yeah, as you said in the intro, Lockie, like the duopoly was working. I think MacArthur kind of stepped on the toes of Western Sydney a bit with their fan base, but Western United, I think, provided another example of how this is successful. And I think, you know, they're in the ascendancy really with this kind of thing. The dichotomy between them and what City have done, it looks like Western United, you know, have their next steps laid out in front of them for progression. Like, you can see where that club can progress and how they already have. I think they've really done a lot of work within their region, and have harnessed the local fans. Whereas for City, it feels like, you know, not the end of the road, but what are their next steps to really create that unique fan base and that unique, you know, why would you support them over Victory or even West United at this stage, like it's not that geographical thing to bring the fans in. So yeah, I just think West United are definitely on the up, and they lay out a good example. And we have said this before about the future is looking bright there, and I think I'd much rather be at a game at full capacity or 4,000, 5,000 compared to a pretty lackluster atmosphere at Amy Park. So one more thing as well. I don't want to get doom and gloom. This is from the A-League Crowd's Twitter account as well, saying that as much chat as there was about this NPL game being the most attended more than the A-League games, that it would have only been the 46th highest attended game this season in the A-League. So yeah, crowd chat, the juxtaposition of it doesn't make it look great, but I think this season for crowds in the A-League, you can't really complain about the averages we're getting, and I think we should celebrate that as well.
I agree. I think you're right. It was a perfect storm of the fixtures going up against each other on the specific weekend that made the comparisons look as drastic as they did. But you're right to point out Western United as well. It feels like the switch on them has been flipped this season. All the realities about their bid in the stadium and the delays behind that are real, but it feels like now that they are out there in Tiny and things are pushing in the right direction. I just want to finish off this expansion discussion by actually proposing a solution, because I feel like that if we're going to bring this up, it's fair to do so. And I'm going to reference a piece that Vince Rigari wrote back in 2023 about a possible expansion system that was floated by the APL to the heads of all the different clubs and reportedly was well received. And it was all based on the condition that the National Second Division comes into existence, right? Which is what we now know. Could this promotion happen while we're still in this Champions League format? You'd probably consider that unlikely, but we now have the steps in front of us to turn that Champions League format into a home and away league, which then could viably provide that stepping stone to the A-League, right? So the idea was that the second tier plays out and you get the most successful clubs, and it's not just as simple as winning the league. You're going to need some kind of set of criteria in terms of the off-field status of the clubs. Say, the A-League entry criteria, that if you pass all of that off-field criteria, your club is in order, you have the support, the finances behind you, history perhaps is a consideration as well, and then you win the Australian Championship or top two or whatever, make the final, then you get to be promoted into the A-League. And then when the A-League grows to a certain size, say 20 teams or so, then you probably promote a bunch more as long as they fit the criteria, and then you split into an A1 league and an A2 league that promotes between each other. That's all technically still the A-League, but there's still no relegation down to the Australian Championship. And when you have a league that is played in winter and a league that is played in summer, Christian, you probably do have to draw that line somewhere, because you're not going to just be able to easily drop teams in and out. It's kind of like what's happening in Japan at the moment. But that seems like a good compromise to give the A-League the competitive jeopardy that it really needs for a lot of these games to remain competitive towards the whole season, and allow a route for teams in the state leagues to be able to reach the national, competition.
Yeah, for sure. I think I want to be against the idea, to be honest. I think it'd provide a bit more stability, without forcing upon a relegation, just promoting a few clubs which, like you said, have the financially viable, they're ticking all the boxes, and you can put those teams in, and then at the same time try and grow the A-League as well, and yet still have this second championship as well to go with it. So I think it does make a lot of sense. Whether it goes through or not, I mean, we'll obviously wait and see, because there's been a lot of ifs and buts, and a lot of negotiations on the table. So I think it's just trying to find the right balance, really. Can these clubs can they be sustainable at the end of the day? Because we've seen some clubs in the negotiations to get in this second tier, they weren't financially, they just couldn't do it right. They had to pull out because they didn't have the funding. They couldn't pay the $500,000 fee up front. So it's just all dependent on all those variables. So I quite like the idea, but whether it goes ahead or not, we'll see. Yeah,
it's fascinating, isn't it? It's definitely a long-term plan. There is a lot to play out, of course, with the Australian Championship and how we get to these 20 teams. And that still leaves room for the odd external, businessman, or woman, and rich owner or whatever to come in and buy a license and set up their team that way if they wanted to. But I think that clear path for these NPL teams or Australian Championship teams is pretty important as well. I want to loop back now to where we started this conversation with Melbourne City against Macarthur on the Friday night. And there's another reason I think that this looks particularly bad. Will, you brought up the comparison of the fixtures. Yes, okay, this wasn't a great week. And just in terms of the matchups in the A-League, it was never going to draw massive crowds. But Jacob, we've talked about this with the Brisbane Roar and the Perry Park situation as well. But you put 3,500 into a suburban football park, it looks quite impressive. But you put it into a 28,000 seater in Amy Park, it looks abysmal. It's hard to watch, actually, the amount of seats that are just between everyone sitting in the stands. And look, the City Football Group, they spent a lot of money developing this new academy out in Casey, which is obviously has a lot of positive impact for them and Australian football as a whole. But Amy Park is not suitable for Melbourne City to be playing non-derby games at. That is a fact. But unfortunately, per the boys at Talking City, who were at the City Fan Forum in February, the City CEO, Brad Rouse, said there are no plans to move the men's matches away from Amy Park, and that they're actually in negotiations to extend the lease for the long term at Amy Park as well, which I just think, you know, you see what Western United are doing. We talked about it, building their stadium set to break ground in the next couple of months, actually. Something like that out in Casey, out in the east, out in your catchment area. It has to be beneficial for the league as a whole. Maybe Melbourne City don't see it that way, but it just seems obvious to me.
Yeah, it seems obvious, and yet here we are for the 900th time talking about it. So, I mean, is it clearly that obvious to those who aren't in, you know, football circles talking about this sort of stuff frequently? And the club, I can kind of understand the perspective of the club just sticking with Amy. From one perspective of, you've got to kind of aspire to have the sort of crowds that can fill it. Number one, you don't, like, from an optics perspective of going, yeah, no, our crowds suck, we're just going to go and move and play somewhere that's only got 3,000.
3,500.
Anyway. You know, it's like, yeah, it's not a great look for your optics, but you know, it's also the familiarity of it, etc., all that sort of stuff. Game day processes and things, you just you know, they're routine for them now. But yeah, it does seem like it would be a good move to move elsewhere. And I think that's one thing that they've always sort of had the problem with, is that they've always shared with the Victory, right? Even back in the Heart days, and even back then the Victory was playing games at Docklands, now Marvel Stadium or whatever it's called, and yet it still felt like, hang on, no, they're both just the same team, just different colours in a way, right? Like, they're playing at the same stadium. And now that the Victory have moved almost permanently to Amy, it's like, yeah, it's definitely getting that feeling where it's like, well, why would people go to City when Victory play at the same stadium? Better atmosphere, you know, the club has that history and that prestige. It just seems a little bit odd. So it would make sense for them to move out, but, you know, money, how we know they're obviously part of the City Group, but how much are the City Group actually putting into running the operation in Melbourne, right? Because they're going to have different amounts allocated to each of the different 100 different teams they've got around the globe, right? You know, how high on their list of importance is getting Melbourne City a stadium? Probably not that high, right? Like, if they're like, well, we've already got a stadium and we're going to just renew the lease, we might even get favourable terms on it. Well, yeah, of course they're just going to take that. So it's a difficult one, because the money would need to come from somewhere. Obviously, taxpayer funding it is a typically pretty poor move from any government that decides to do that, to fund stadiums. So that's unlikely. And also, we've seen a reluctance to invest in football in the first place. So it's a case of, you can understand from the City perspective of the optics of it doesn't look great. The money, where's that going to come from? Does it come from the City Group itself? Why would they put that sort of money into an operation that, in the grand scheme of things, probably isn't high up on their list? Like, there's a lot of things that don't quite add up, as much as it would make sense from a fans and a footballing and a perspective. It just, it doesn't seem to quite all add up. At least that's what I'm assuming they're thinking, right? Because that's all that I can come up with. Because you're right, it would be so much better for them to have their own place. We've seen what it's done for Western. You know, they've still got the same amount of fans coming out to games, Western, but it looks so much better on TV. And I've not been out there in person. I don't know if you or Christian have been either, but it looks like a better atmosphere as well. So it does seem a no-brainer, but there's got to be something there that's stopping it from happening.
Yeah, well, I mean, they've said they're not moving, so it feels kind of futile to talk about, but it seems obvious. Let's get into the football. Max Caputo, he's been injured most of the season, but his brace on Friday night, it feels like he's now joined that kind of the group of young Aussie strikers that have really made their impact this season specifically. And to be fair, we probably already knew a bit about him, but it's just that injury that's kept him out. It's kept him in the shadows a little bit, but 2 goals here to start things again, and particularly obviously one as a penalty, but that finish at the near post, diving in with that run, absolute quality.
Yeah, so, I mean, you were saying we've known about him for a little bit. He seemed kind of that one bolter option we had, and as a young striker coming through, it seemed like we had a shortage for a little bit, and he was kind of that guy. But, the stockpile's been growing in that regard, so it's good that he's come back and shown straight away that he still has it. And was it his ACL he did?
Good question.
I feel like it might have been.
I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, but it was pre-season. I remember it coming. But yeah, so it's good to see him, straight back in it. And yeah, as you said, that finish, excellent. I don't know how he squeezed that in from there, and even the ball over. The camera angle kind of lied a bit. I definitely thought it was offside, but then you can use the pitch lines and you can see that it's quite a bit onside. But yeah, excellent showing, and really shows the bigger picture of Melbourne City at the moment, and you have the pieces coming back in, but they did so well even when that squad was thinned out. So it's they only really can go up from here in that regard. So no, dangerous to see, but glad he's back on the score sheet there for sure.
A syndesmosis injury and fractured fibula that he sustained in a pre-season training session. That sounds absolutely horrible. Christian, but since his return and a lot of their other returns as well, it feels like a lot of things are falling into place for City now. To be honest, me personally, I think we're seeing the emergence of probably the best championship contender for Auckland for this season. Their injured players are returning. They pretty much have a fully available squad. The only exceptions are Andrew Naboo, who's out for the season, and James Jego, who, given the quality of Kai Truan at the moment, you don't really see coming in, at least, forcing his way straight away into the starting 11. Some of the players that were a little bit struggling early on in the season, the likes of Germain Ferreira, even Patrick Beach, were exceptional in this game and have had a pretty good few weeks as well. And then you still got some of those young kids exhibiting a lot of quality. Obviously, Caputo coming back, Kavian Ramani the last couple of weeks as well. All these pieces are now still clicking. They earned enough points when they were doing it tough to be in a good situation, and now it feels like they're really storming home.
I think that was the key for Vidmar, wasn't it? Just grinding out those points, whether it be 1 point, just get a draw and just get along with it, because they did have a pretty injury-riddled first part of the season. They had to, really, I guess, steady the ship in some sense. I mean, there was a game, I forgot it was the first or second Melbourne derby, but I believe it was the first. I think Jimmy Jego went down injured before in the warm-up.
The second one. That was the second one.
The second one?
Yep.
And it's been instances like that where City have really had to adapt at the last minute, right, and just throw in some of the youngsters, right. I mean, I was looking at the bench against Macarthur. They had Lawrence Wong, who scored that great goal a couple of weeks ago. They've got Steven Ugarkovic on the bench, so they've got some talent there, right. They've got a bit of depth about them, so that's what makes it scary. Now that everyone's fit, albeit Andrew Naboo, who's obviously out for the rest of the season, I think they do have a lot of pieces there to really go far, because all the clubs besides Auckland don't really seem to want to put their hand up and want to win this championship, right? Because they're just dropping points for fun. So, I do think they are a genuine threat, to go deep and potentially make a grand final. I know we'll touch on the power rankings a bit later, but what about Ferreira's tackle? I believe it was the second half. Oh,
so good.
That was amazing. Nice. I had to mention that. That was incredible. Probably the tackle of the season. I have to go back and look at other tackles, but that was right up there.
Go back and look at other tackles. Literally, said nobody ever.
That's literally. What if there was one that I missed though? What if if there was one that I missed, but no, like literally straight through on goal and just literally saves a goal. That was incredible tackle. So I think it's all coming together for them. Just fingers crossed for their sake that they don't experience another round of injuries. Otherwise, I don't think they can take that. At least Vidmar can't, because I think his hair's been pulled out. So hopefully they're able to steady the ship.
I still vividly remember the first press conference I did with Vidmar at the start of the season, before round one. And I'd seen the squads for the weekend come out, and City had the longest injury list out of anyone in the season. And I don't think it was me, but someone asked him about the injuries, and he was speaking positively. We're happy that, 2/3 of the squad have made it through pre-season, completing every session. And I'm thinking, is 2/3 really the kind of number that you're supposed to be excited about? And it's plagued them for the whole season, to be fair. But yeah, definitely reaping the rewards of such a quality squad now. Jacob, another team that maybe have turned some opinions this weekend is Melbourne Victory, the other side of this Melbourne Derby clash. One of their most convincing performances of the season. A lot of changes up top. Bruno Fornaroli came in, scored an amazing goal. No Nikos Virgos, no Zinedine Mishash, which was probably a big call from Arthur Dillis as well. They pressed a lot harder than usual. Mishash probably scoring that long-range goal maybe just needed that little bit of a reminder that maybe he's not a permanent lock on the starting sheet. Just to know that there's a bit of competition was enough for him to kind of kick up a gear and, tell Ryan Teague, don't worry, I got this, with a little smirk after the goal as well. And then, cap it all off, Alex Badalado coming off the bench and creating, I think, 4 chances in his 25 minutes. It was a much improved performance from the Victory.
Much better from them. It's just almost sort of what you would expect from the Victory, but we haven't seen so much of this season. Bruno scoring an individual goal, colour me unsurprised. I mean, that's just what we've come to expect from him. And while he's not quite been able to get it going every game this season, I think we've seen enough now that this sort of striker debate over who's going to start between him and Virgos, I think it's pretty clearly going to be Bruno moving forwards now with the way that he's been playing and the form that he's in. I mean, it's no slight on Virgos. It's not like he's been absolutely woeful, but when you got somebody like Bruno finding their form again, it's difficult to look past him. No Mishash was a big call from Arthur Dillis, because Mishash is one of those players who, especially last season, you saw when he came into that Victory side, completely changed the way that the Victory went about attacking and playing in the final third, especially in transitional moments, right? Because he's so quick, but he's also really strong. He's a big guy. Like, you can't tackle him. He can hit the ball really well, picks out a nice pass. And it felt like sort of last season, a lot of what the Victory were doing was going through him and trying to get him involved. And then this season, that dried up a little bit. He wasn't quite producing at the start of the season, and throughout the season, as probably would have liked to have seen from him. But this goal was, a nice little effort, and hopefully a little bit of a confidence boost for him as well, right? To say, I am still, I can still perform at this level. I've just maybe, been unlucky, or I've not quite done this or that right, or whatever it might be, but I know that I can do that. And I think for the Victory, that would be huge, because the final third has been really the big problem for the Victory for large chunks of the season. In recent weeks, it's been the defensive third, where there's been a lot of problems, but I think for the most part, the story of the season has been not converting chances and not creating good enough chances. So I think if Mishash can come back and he can play at that sort of a level frequently, then that's going to be huge. But yeah, they really sort of turned a corner here, and it's another week where we're saying anything can happen in the top 6, top 7, because teams are just so inconsistent at the moment. But I think that now, as we creep closer and closer to finals, we're going to start to see the true form and the real level of these teams, right? It's been a long season, a lot of injuries for a lot of teams, some crazy fixture lists and things like that. So for Victory, I think they're starting, hopefully, to find form at the right time, to be able to then lead into finals, off the back of some good performances, and be able to carry that on through. Because at the moment, as Christian said, sort of outside Auckland, nobody's really putting their hand up to say, yeah, we actually want to compete in the league this year, right? It's sort of a bunch of teams below that are just riding the wave and hoping things go their way. So yeah, Victory can sort of start to strong arm their way back into contention. The title's basically wrapped up by Auckland at this point. But if they can lead into the finals with some good form, then there's no suggesting that they can't go really deep. And they've got the history there, they've got the players there to do it. It's just about getting that mentality right and finding that form and getting their footing right. And I think a result like this, where they played, it was a clinical result. They didn't really put a foot wrong all game. Players came off the bench and contributed. Players that were starting contributed. It's what you want to see from a side, especially now as the season starts to draw to a close. So it's a big one for Victory, and maybe it is a sign that they are turning that corner and starting to find their footing again.
Can I put an argument on the table? Melbourne Victory have the best depth in the league. Is that fair to say? With the arrival of
best depth.
Best depth.
We kind of said that at the start of the season. I think attacking wise, yeah. I don't really think defensively.
Defensively, yeah.
Well, interestingly, I looked at the lineup on the weekend.
I think that just adds another dimension. Look at the bench. They've got, Mushash on the bench, Virgos, Santos, who's been playing well. Badalata, I just mentioned. Jing Reese, he's been average. He's probably the only one.
Don't forget about him.
Lachlan, don't forget him. Lachlan Jackson. And then you've got players in there who've, Reno Piscopo, who we've just completely forgotten about all of a sudden. He had a terrific first half of the season. Azani, we forget about him as well. Nishan Valupale, Fornaroli, that was the front four starting against the Mariners. And then obviously Teague, Valadon in the midfield. I just think they've got a really good balance. And you could probably argue Auckland number one because of their form and their consistency, and that's probably part of the reason, like Steve Corica, right, that's his job to get the best out of his side. And maybe if Corica was coaching the Victory, which I know Victory fans don't like to hear the sound of that, but maybe Corica would be able to get a little bit more out of this Victory side. But I just think talent overall, I think there's a big argument to be made that in terms of depth, I think Victory are certainly up there.
They do have to be careful to balance that bench properly, though, because I looked at this squad lineup, more match day squad, and I said to my dad, who I was watching the game with, they better be careful that no defender goes down here, because Lachlan Jackson is the only defensive player on that list. There's no Adama Traore. And what happens? Casey Boss gets injured in the first 20 minutes and has to play the remainder of the game injured. That's what happened, right? He played through apparently a lot of pain. They have a lot of attacking depth, but you can't forget about the other end of the pitch. Go on.
I just don't think you can read as much as you guys have into beating the Mariners. I really just don't think you can.
That is a good point. That is a good point. It is the Mariners.
They just roll over. If you don't do it, you said it before, Jacob, as well, like Victory didn't put a foot wrong. That is all you have to do against the Mariners, because they will shoot themselves in the foot consistently. Like, they will just give you freebies left, right and centre, and they should have had another one. Docker just gave the ball away for Virgos to have a shot, and it was a great save from Prach Cullen. But they just roll over so easy. I don't know how much we can read into this Victory.
They only had one shot in the game as well. I know Mariners haven't been good, but to have one shot for the whole game, I didn't expect it to be that bad. No.
It's just dire. So look, as much as you guys give them the props, I really do. Yeah, I don't think you can use that as a predictor of future events here.
Fair enough. Unfortunate moment for Haynes as well. As we talked about, some of these young keepers have been the big one, right? Errors like that are going to happen. He clearly has a lot of quality. Good on for the rest of the team for putting their arm around him as well and getting him back up. He had a good rest of the match. But on that kind of theme of, trying to read into these performances, because this middle pack is so tight, what I wanted to do for everyone listening is we're going to try and put together a kind of power rankings for these top 7 teams, because the rankings seem to change every week. There's lots of teams with uneven games played, so it's hard to gauge exactly where teams should be on the ladder as well. So under the proviso or the thesis of, if the grand final was played today, who would win it? What are our order of these top 7 teams? Jacob, you came out straight away when I suggested this and just said Auckland at the top. That's all we need to think about. I'm not sure. As I said, the A-League is a very competitively balanced league, so anything can happen. They have faltered a little bit in the last couple of weeks. And honestly, this might be a little bit crazy, but I'm looking at Sydney FC on the back of their form in their last 3 games in the Champions League and in the league. Who they played last? They played Macarthur, right? I'm looking at them as an extremely dangerous side and as a contender for that number 1 spot.
I think Sydney's a good shout. I'd still have Auckland as the number 1 though. I just think that there's almost sort of an assuredness about them where it doesn't feel like when you're watching them that they're going to do something silly, that they're going to give away a goal, that they're going to play poorly, that most importantly that they're going to lose. Whereas, you know, Sydney, there's still all those moments, especially in transition, and they've tidied it up exceptionally over the season. Don't get me wrong. They have come leaps and bounds from where they were at the start of the season in terms of, you know, out of possession stuff. But I still think that there are a few heart in mouth moments that they have there. And while they're this extremely exciting team, especially in the front third, and they're playing really beautiful football at the moment, I still think that Auckland they just have that, I don't know, I guess it's kind of an aura about them where it just feels like it's a done deal. And maybe that's, you know, sort of clouding my judgment a little bit on being too impacted by the Auckland propagandists, but it does feel like they are an almost sure thing at this point in time. But I would agree with you. I would have Sydney as my number 2, to be honest, given, their recent form in Champions League has been tremendous. And they've got so many key attacking players that you were talking, Christian, just before about the Victory and the options that they've got, but Sydney have shown all season long that they can, you know, rotate pieces in and out and still perform well. So they'd be my number 2, to be honest, behind Auckland. I'd still have Auckland number 1.
Auckland has to be number 1. I don't think you can argue.
I can argue. You're about to say that if you don't think you can argue.
Oh, who are the Mariners?
No, quite obviously not. I was just trashing them for a couple of minutes. No, I think I looked at it in the way, like, especially grand final, Lockie, I think that was the wording you used. I think Auckland they seem set up to win the league. They will win this league if you play it again 10 out of 10 times. I think that's what they're set up to do. But I'm just not convinced in a grand final. I don't know. It's just a feeling. I've took the power rankings to kind of, I ranked mine by how confident would I be that they could beat any other team in the league, like just outright win if it was a final do or die game. Western United are first for me.
Wow.
I think I even have Wanderers above Auckland. I'm more convinced in a one-off that they would be more, you know, and then Sydney are probably ahead of Wanderers. Mine can do with some shuffling there, but just in terms of like overpowering another side in a game, I think there's other squads in this league that are set up, better to do that. So I kind of took it like that. Sydney are up there for sure. City, I have them about that middle of the pack. I know you said it's a top 7, Lockie. I did actually include Jets above Victory and Adelaide. Just purely,
at this point, yeah.
At this point, I think Victory and Adelaide are probably the most likely to slip out of that top 6 for me. And you know, as miraculous as it would be, I think the Jets could do it. Just in the power rankings for me, they're above those two sides for now. But yeah, I think Western United are on top, and if Western United and Auckland played, you know, grand final tomorrow, I reckon Western United will win it.
See, okay, I don't like the point you made where it's how confident am I that they can just completely, you know, destroy another team sort of thing, because when was the last time there was that's stupid, the Mariners did it, never mind, ignore that. I was going to say, when was the last time there was a grand final where it was a case of a team just absolutely just beating the morale out of another one? But
6-1.
At least historically, grand finals have been about who can stay alive the longest, and I think that's what Auckland have done so well this season. So
I get that, but the Jets carved so many chances against Auckland. I just think they're fallible at the moment. Like, I think if it was right now, that's what power rankings are right this second.
Okay.
Auckland are not number 1 for me.
Interesting. I think you've been outvoted, but we hear your argument. I think...
I don't care.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. Christian, what about, give me like a 2, 3, and 4. You kind of got Western United, who are obviously in a very good form. I'm throwing in Sydney FC as a kind of bolter from 7th place, and probably Melbourne City as well. I don't think Victory, Adelaide and Wanderers have anywhere near the consistency to be able to push into that top 4 at the moment.
Can I give my 1 to 7? Do you want me to give my 1
sure.
to 7?
Just give me the 1 to 4 first. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
1, I've got Auckland. 2, Melbourne City, for the reasons you mentioned before. Like, I think I do trust them a lot in a grand final. Number 3, Victory, because of the depth that I just mentioned. Number 4, Western United. I don't agree with Western United number 1, because in a grand final, if that's what we're basing it on, I'm the opposite to I don't trust them in a grand final, because yes, they play pretty football, it's entertaining, but it's not a side like Auckland who just knows how to get the job done, right? When their backs are against the wall. Western United have had a few performances here and there that haven't quite convinced me. So grand final, I'd have it, probably fourth in my power rankings. But I know you sent a message in the group chat about there's a couple of comments. Apparently, I was bagging West United saying and this is but no, that's not the case at all. Because I admit they've been playing some great stuff, but this is about a one-off game in a grand final. I just think those three teams that I mentioned above them I just trust them more.
There you go, Sam. That's if you're listening, that's going to be about as much of a concession as you're going to get out of Christian.
Sorry, Sam.
There you go. Look, yeah, okay. So we're kind of thinking Auckland, Melbourne City. I'm feeling more vibes as number 2, and then we kind of got. I still think Sydney FC are above Western and Victory for me. I just think their first 11 is exceptional. They got one or two pieces off the bench that can make a big impact as well. Down the bottom, Jacob, do you want to take those teams, kind of Adelaide, Victory, Wanderers? How are you figuring those ones out?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I lean more towards Victory as being the more sure thing of those three. I just think that they're more likely to see out a result. I mean, what we've gotten from Adelaide and the Wanderers so far this season is a lot of goals, which is a great thing, but they're just conceding way too frequently. And the wins that they do get are really tight things where it's like it's a goal in it. There have been moments where it's been, favourable refereeing calls that have, almost sort of given results to those two teams. So it sort of feels like a Victory seem like at this point, especially with their recent form, right, undefeated with 2 wins in their last 4. That being said, the Wanderers have 4 wins in their last 5, but there's still I have question marks about their mentality as a side, because all season long it's been the same thing of they can score goals plenty. I mean, they're the top scoring side in the league, but they're sitting 6th because they just concede so many. And it's like in a grand final, if you concede goals, that can drop your morale almost immediately. And that's what the Mariners managed to do to City a couple of years ago, right? Was they just got on the front foot early and put some goals away, and all of a sudden City couldn't recover. And I feel like it's the same sort of story for the Wanderers, and especially for Adelaide. So I'm putting Victory above them, and I'm probably going to put the Wanderers above Adelaide, because Adelaide have been, I think, especially in the last month and a half, 2 months, really, really, really poor. And it's been a case of they've been almost sort of riding their luck, scoring goals and papering over the cracks. But then, recently when there's been any sort of player unavailability, as we've seen with, international departures, injuries, illness, whatever, everything falls apart for them and they can't get the job done. And I think that sort of vulnerability isn't quite as present in the Wanderers. So I'd put it Victory, then the Wanderers, and then Adelaide. All
right. So I'm kind of just group kind of consensus. Auckland, City, I'll say Western, Sydney FC, Victory, Wanderers, Adelaide. There are our power rankings as of round 23 in the A-League, something like that. So there you go. Let us know what you think. Jake, I'm going to come back to you because there was another interesting thing in the Adelaide game. Made to play in extremely warm conditions, 4 drinks breaks across the 90 and a bit minutes. Seems excessive to me. I think it was Vreen spoke after the game, wasn't too happy about it either. It's a very difficult scenario to play football in. It was made difficult for the league because it was both a TV game and the first leg of a doubleheader, which puts in a lot of constraints around it in terms of, do you push the game back an hour, something like that. But it did detract from the spectacle of the game.
Yeah, it was. I wrote about this on the website, but yeah, Vreens and Colvier were in particular none too pleased with it. Vreens' perspective was quite interesting for me because it was kind of a bit au fait, but he mentioned essentially that there's only so much players can actually do to prepare for games in these sorts of conditions. Because he's like, you come to Australia, expect it to be hot, but when you have to actually play in it, it's another thing entirely. He's like, and he asked his teammates, Australian guys who have been here their whole lives, who've played here the whole time, what can I do? I'll just drink loads of water. Like, when it gets to that point and that's all that you can do as a player, I think that sort of borders on dangerous and a little bit negligent almost to play in those conditions, especially when you need 4 drinks breaks in a game. I can understand one if it's 33, 34, 35 and you need a drinks break, I get it. But when it's 36 degrees at kickoff, you need 2 drinks breaks per half. you got to look at it and go, is it worth playing this game? And I had a look at the rules for the article that I wrote, and it's actually an adjustment that was made in the off season, in the lead up to this season, was to bring it more in line with what IFAB do. And even then, it's still considered a conservative heat policy here in Australia, which is crazy thing to think about considering how hot it gets during some of the games. But yeah, the idea of having multiple drinks breaks is it's a decision made by the match commissioner, but he also has to talk with the match officials and the team doctors to come to that conclusion. So from that perspective, you go, well, the team doctors are saying it's fine, but then you're getting the players saying you can't prepare for these sorts of conditions. All you can do is drink a lot of water and hope you don't break down. You got Carl Viet going, we've known it was going to be 36, 37 degrees for weeks, and yet nothing was done to actually accommodate for that. It sort of seems like actually nobody's all that pleased that the game went ahead. Obviously the fans had to go and sit out there in that heat, even in the shade. People were saying it was incredibly warm. It just seemed like nobody actually enjoyed it there. And you're right, Lockie, it didn't end in much of a spectacle, right? I mean, 2 fantastic goals in that game, don't get me wrong. 2 youngsters coming out, essentially mirror images, right, of one another. Crawford cutting in on the left to hit it with his left foot, Brissett cutting in on the right to hit it with his right foot, both of them into the far corner. But outside of that, the game was just slow and boring, and you could tell it was taking a toll on the players. So I think there's got to come a point, and we had this discussion in the group chat and it got quite heated, but there's got to come a point where you just go, if you have to have that many drinks breaks, or if it's that sort of temperature, you just can't play the game. Like it takes away from everything that you're trying to do in this league, which is play exciting football and draw people in. If it's going to be that hot and you're having these many breaks and the players, even with those breaks, aren't playing at 100%, I think it's not worth it. So hopefully it's a learning experience for the league moving forwards to go, right, this doesn't work, having these multiple drinks breaks games. I think it's the first time it's happened in the men's, but I believe it happened a couple of weeks ago in the women's league as well. So, hopefully they can go, right, this clearly isn't a feasible way of approaching these hot fixtures, because, at some point, player safety is paramount, but beyond that as well, it's what you're putting out on the
You done another one.
I didn't even mean to do that, but yeah, beyond even just player safety, it's about what is the point of it when nobody wants to be out there and nobody wants to watch it. So yeah, it was a bit of a disappointing thing, because I think from the glimpses that we got when things were going well with those 2 goals, it could have been a very entertaining game, but the conditions just meant it couldn't be sustained for any period of time, and I think that's really disappointing.
All right. Well, Will, you brought up an extra 8 team into our little top 7 power rankings. The Jets are kind of that one team off that lower pack that are a little bit of a bolter, and they had 3 wins in a row. It was great. I think it was 5 undefeated before this game. They were going for their 4th win in a row, which would have been the first time they've done that in 17 years, which is quite astounding. They didn't quite get it, but it's against Auckland FC, so that's a different benchmark that we're comparing them with now, right? 3 wins is great, but Auckland FC, if you're really, real about making a charge and competing in finals, well then this is a good benchmark. And a 1-1 draw, you have to say that's pretty positive for them, right? Verstraete got sent off. They were down to 10 for the last 15 minutes. The Jets couldn't capitalise, but they clearly had the better of this game. I think they had about 2 XG, something like that. It almost feels like it's a little vindication for their recent run, and maybe just enough. They do have some games in hand as well. Just enough momentum pushing forwards to say they could put on a run here. Yeah,
exactly. I think this type of performance against a team like Auckland just shows that they can make these chances, and really if on another day they win this game. Grosses doesn't have an absolute stinker of a penalty. One of the worst I've seen, just in terms of low, soft, perfect saving height for the keeper, nowhere near the corner. It was just, really awful penalty. And in 20 minutes, that's, so important to double the lead there. They surely could have held on for that. I think they deserve something out of this game. It's just, they're lacking just a little bit of consistency and that little final bit of quality, honestly, across the field in a few departments, but they still carved out chances. And you've got Eli Adams with a wonder strike. You've got players who on their day can really step up and really trouble a lot of defenses. So No, they're just exciting, and it's really, I don't know, from a unbiased league point of view, it's always good to see Newcastle kind of enjoying a run like this, and yeah, so I think it's more optimism that and I want to wish them well, really, in a way that I can kind of fathom them getting into the top six with their games in hand, and it's a bit of a pipe dream, but you can't rule it out yet, and they're in form. I included them in my power rankings because I think they can trouble most of the sides in this league. So no, really exciting, and yeah, they definitely I think they deserve something from this game. So unlucky not to get 3 points there would have been a big help for them sliding up the ladder there.
That passage of play with the poor penalty, the save from Alex Paulson. He saved a few penalties last season. He's recaptured some of that form, and then it goes down the other end, and Jesse Randall puts this screamer in the back of the net, and then it turns out that his goal is 0 as well, just because he's offside in a phase of the play where he really didn't need to be as well, and then he wastes that beautiful finish off it. Just a really crazy couple of minutes as well. It was quite funny.
Was that a handball, by the way, Nando Pinecker?
Yeah,
like it came off his hand, but to not see the ball.
He doesn't have to be. It doesn't matter if you're looking at it or not. Come on, it's unfortunate, but it's a handball. Could have led to a goal easily. Like that's just handball.
Yeah, I just thought I'd raise it. I didn't say yes.
Next time I'm just going to handball.
Trying to drum up some controversy.
I'm just going to close my eyes and just push someone over and say I couldn't see him.
All right. To finish us off tonight, this is one of the most just amusing, honestly, from an Australian perspective, football stories that's been developing over the last week. So, of course, this week, Sydney FC will come up against Jean Book in the second leg of their Champions League 2 quarterfinal tie. And it is still an if, but if they do get through that, as we said last week, we thought their potential opponents will probably be Sanfrecce Hiroshima, who is, of course, the team that Tolga Arslan and Valais Germain play for now. However, that may no longer be the case. So, as we told you last week, Hiroshima beat Lion City Sailors from Singapore 6-1 in the first leg of that quarterfinal, where one of the goal scorers was Valais Germain. He came on in the second half and notched his, maybe not first goal for the club, but he definitely notched a goal. As it turns out, Germain should have been serving a 3-match suspension given to him for slapping a Central Coast Mariners player after the ASEAN Zonal final of last year's AFC Cup. The AFC have now ruled that Hiroshima forfeit that leg of the tie. So instead of being 3 goals up, instead of being 5 goals down, I should say, Lion City are now 3 goals up going into the second leg at home. It's a complete dramatic shift in the status of this tie, and it's the one that could give Sydney FC a much easier path to claiming this trophy.
It's just staggering how no one at Sanfrecce knew about this, right? They just swept it under the carpet, didn't know about it, they let him play, and they weren't aware of that 3-match ban, right? Because obviously they put themselves in this bizarre position where they've just won a game 6-1. They're thinking, okay, we're going to plan ahead. Are we going to play Sydney or John Book? And now we've got to chase a 3-0, a 3-0 disadvantage. Like, what's going on? You've got to put your hands in your head and think, like, how do you get to that point where you don't realize that, right? And surely Germain knew as well, right? Because he would have been given the suspension, no? He would have known.
I think this is the difficult thing, right? Is that it was obviously MacArthur didn't make Asian football this year for this season. And while the rules state that a suspension will follow a player to their next eligible club, how much of that the players are actually aware, I don't know, right? You're not thinking, I've not played Asian football all season long. That he's probably forgotten he got that suspension. Let's not forget he got a 2-game suspension, for MacArthur in the league.
So he left MacArthur with 2
his mind's on that one. His mind would have been on that one, not on the one that happened a year ago.
But this is where it gets confusing, right? So there's all these different competitions, and you probably got the three-game ban. And Germain, just say he knew it, right? Just say he knew that he got banned for 3 matches. Maybe he would have assumed, okay, that's it doesn't. I don't know. Well, it's the same competition, I guess. AFC Cup, they've just changed the branding. It's ACL2. I was just going to suggest maybe it's a different competition. Whereas,
it kind of is. Like, the structure is very different. I was
about to say, it's kind of is, and that's where it gets so confusing, right? So maybe it's the responsibility of the AFC to just come out, have the list, say, okay, this player's been banned for 3 games, and I know it's a bit difficult to police, but at the same time, it's hard to criticise Sanfrecce at the same time for having to know that information, right? Because they've just signed this new player. And
I think it's on the team manager of Sanfrecce. Like, it's fully on there. This wouldn't even happen in my competition, you know, like, sure, it comes up. I don't know what system they use, but you know,
but how do you miss that though?
Comes up ineligible. Like, I don't know how it works. Obviously, it's not really like a digital registration, squad registration and stuff, because it should have been flagged earlier. So I have no clue how it slips through that many hands. But it's on Sanfrecce. I don't think it's on Shaman to really remember that. But yeah, shocking. I mean, they deserve to be down. It just shouldn't happen, really.
It's a question of resources, right? Like, if the AFC went around trying to police all those things proactively, they wouldn't get anything done, right? It's like getting a roadworthiness on your car. Like, it's, you know, you're putting that expense on the person with the car rather than the authority, because this is how it's going to get done. It's the team's responsibility, and the AFC have these rules in place to say, well, when you get it wrong, this is how you're going to be punished for it. And it's quite crazy. So apparently, I don't really understand the logic of this, but despite playing in that game, he is considered to have served one of his 3 matches. So if they do still make it through, he could play in that second leg against Sydney, which would be hilarious.
I love that the idea that they've gone, no, he's ineligible, but we're going to count it towards one of those games.
I guess he had no advantage in the game. Like,
well, because it got pulled back in the end. That's crazy though.
It's forfeited. So
the Sailors are playing their second leg at home because they travelled away to Sanfrecce, I believe. They lost 6-1 there. So it's not like they're having to travel to Sanfrecce and having to park the bus and get a result, right? They're at home. They've got definitely a better chance to make it some more respectable compared to that first leg. So, I mean, yeah, you definitely expect them. Like, they wouldn't have expected this, right? I mean, this is a dream scenario for them to really, I guess, just get as many numbers back as possible. It can still backfire. Obviously, if Sanfrecce can still get through, it's not, you know, a foregone conclusion. But that just from a 6-1 to a 3-0 lead, like, that's just crazy. So, if they can pull that off, then Sydney FC pencil them in for the next round.
Yeah, it's crazy. And pencil them in. And I did actually go and do my research this week. My understanding is that if whoever wins from the east side of the competition will get to host the one-off final. So all of a sudden, we already thought Sydney FC would have a good chance. It was going to be competitive, but they were going to be able to do it. Suddenly, this is just blown wide open as a competition that they have a seriously legitimate, probably even favourite at this specific point in time. They are probably the favourites for the competition, which is saying something very, very cool. But that Sanfrecce game is on Wednesday night. That's going to be a fascinating encounter against Lion City. Sydney FC on Thursday. We're going to try and get the live stream up and running again. I'm not going to make any promises just yet, but we're going to do our best. But that will do for this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. Thank you all very much for listening at home. And Will Boo, thank you for your company tonight.
Thank you. Good to dust off the boots. Back out there.
Absolutely. Christian Montegan, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
And Jacob Stevens.
Thank you very much.
We will be back on Friday for the recap of this round of the AFC Champions League 2. Sydney FC, of course, 2-0 up in their tie over Jean Book. We'll be back then. Thank you again very much for listening. We appreciate your company. Goodbye.